Brooklyn, New York, June 1970. A crowded bar fills with smoke and laughter. At one table sits William "Billy Bats" Bentvena, a Gambino crime family soldier newly returned from federal prison. Across the room stands Tommy DeSimone, younger and still only an associate. Bats raises a glass and mocks him with an old insult about shining shoes. The room laughs. In the mafia, rank means protection. A made man cannot be touched without permission. Bats knew that rule. DeSimone knew it too. But that night, the rule was about to be broken. If you enjoy real underworld history drawn from documented events, consider subscribing. The meaning of a made man. In the American mafia, the title of made man meant far more than status. It was membership in a closed system of power. Once formally inducted into a crime family, a man became a sworn soldier under the protection of the organization. In theory, his life belonged to the family, and no one could harm him without permission from its leadership. The ceremony itself was secretive and symbolic. A finger was pricked for blood, a saint's card burned in the hand, and an oath of loyalty to La Cosa Nostra was sworn. From that moment, the rules changed. A made man could run gambling operations, loan sharking networks, and other rackets under the family's protection. Associates worked beneath him, passing a share of their earnings upward. Disputes were handled through hierarchy, not street fights. But that protection created tension. Associates could make money, but they held no real authority. They could not attend family meetings, rise into leadership, or challenge a made soldier without approval. For men like Tommy DeSimone, that system could feel suffocating, because once a man carried the protection of his family, any attack on him was no longer personal. It became a violation of the mafia's highest law. Billy Bats before prison. Long before the night that sealed his fate, William "Billy Bats" Bentvena had already built a reputation inside the Gambino crime family. In the 1950s and early 1960s, Brooklyn's underworld operated through quiet, steady businesses, illegal gambling rooms, loan sharking networks, and neighborhood bars that doubled as meeting places for soldiers and associates. Bats worked inside that system, collecting payments, supervising card games, and keeping order in the territory he operated. Reliable earners were valuable in the mafia. A soldier who could maintain control without attracting police attention often earned the trust of his superiors. Bats eventually became a made man in the Gambino organization, a position that carried authority over associates and protection under mafia rules. But the same criminal activity that built his standing also attracted federal investigators. In the mid-1960s, Bats was convicted in a narcotics case and sentenced to prison. The conviction and his background are documented in historical records. For several years, he was removed from the streets while Brooklyn's underworld quietly evolved. Younger crews moved into profitable rackets and new alliances formed between neighborhoods and crime families. When Bats finally walked out of prison and returned to Brooklyn around 1970, he believed his rank would restore the respect he had left behind. The problem was that the streets he returned to were no longer the same. Prison, reputation, and the return. Federal prison in the 1960s was a common interruption in the lives of many mafia soldiers. A sentence did not necessarily end a career. In some cases, it strengthened a man's standing. Time served without cooperating with authorities was often seen as proof of loyalty. William "Billy Bats" Bentvena spent several years away from Brooklyn during the mid-1960s. While he was gone, the streets continued to move. Gambling operations shifted, younger associates stepped into profitable rackets, and different crews expanded their influence across the borough. When Bats finally returned to Brooklyn around the end of the decade, he expected to step back into the authority that came with his position in the Gambino crime family. In the mafia world, prison time was supposed to earn respect, not erase it. But the neighborhood he came back to was no longer the one he had left. A new generation of operators had grown into power during his absence. These were men who had built their own reputations while Bats was behind bars. Men who had learned the business under different captains and different priorities. Among them were associates connected to the Lucchese crime family crew led by Vario. They were younger, ambitious, and deeply involved in lucrative theft operations spreading across Brooklyn and Queens. Their money did not come from the slow neighborhood rackets that had built Bat's career. It came from fast, high-risk crimes that moved enormous value in a single night. Bats returned expecting deference. Instead, he walked back into a world where respect was already being renegotiated. For more true stories from the hidden world behind the headlines, consider subscribing. Paul Vario's enterprise in Brooklyn. While Bats was serving time, one of the most active criminal operations in Brooklyn was being run by a Lucchese crime family captain named Paul Vario. Vario controlled a crew that operated primarily out of East New York and nearby neighborhoods. His influence extended through restaurants, social clubs, and bars that functioned as gathering places for associates and business partners. From the outside, they appeared to be ordinary establishments. Inside, they served as the headquarters of a growing criminal enterprise. The crew's operations were diverse. Illegal gambling and loan sharking still produced reliable income, but Vario's organization had also expanded into a much more profitable line of work: cargo theft. New York's airports and shipping terminals moved enormous amounts of valuable goods every day. Electronics, clothing, jewelry, and imported products passed through warehouses before reaching stores across the country. Crews connected to the Lucchese family learned how to intercept that flow. Associates like Henry Hill, Jimmy Burke, and Tommy DeSimone became deeply involved in these operations. Some worked with truck drivers and warehouse employees who provided information about shipments. Others handled the distribution of stolen goods through fences who could quietly sell them back into the legitimate market. The system functioned like a business network. One group identified targets. Another handled the theft. Others moved the merchandise through buyers who knew how to hide the origin of the goods. Money flowed back up the chain, with profits distributed through the crew. By the late 1960s, the operation had grown large enough that its influence reached far beyond one neighborhood, and eventually it would collide with someone who believed he already owned that territory. A dangerous overlap of territories. Brooklyn's underworld was divided less by streets than by relationships and authority. Different mafia families controlled different crews, but their operations often existed within the same neighborhoods. That overlap required careful balance. William "Billy Bats" Bentvena belonged to the Gambino crime family. Paul Vario commanded a crew within the Lucchese organization. Both families operated throughout New York City, and both had soldiers and associates moving through the same bars, social clubs, and gambling locations. In theory, the system worked because of hierarchy. A made man from one family was expected to respect the authority of a made man from another. Disputes could be discussed between captains or higher leadership before they escalated. The structure was designed to prevent chaos, but the reality was rarely so clean. Bats' return to Brooklyn placed him back into neighborhoods where Vario's associates were already deeply embedded. Bars that served as meeting spots for one crew were often visited by members of another. Gambling operations overlapped. Loan sharking customers borrowed money from whoever offered it. Personal pride complicated the arrangement. Bats carried the authority of a Gambino soldier and expected younger men to acknowledge it. Many of the men now operating in the area had built their reputations during the years he was gone. For them, respect had to move both ways. The tension did not start with violence. It started with small gestures, comments, jokes, moments where one man expected obedience and another refused to show it. Inside the mafia, those small moments could carry enormous consequences. Because once a dispute crossed the invisible line of hierarchy, it stopped being personal. It became a problem for the entire organization. The insult that broke the rules. Brooklyn, New York, June 1970. A neighborhood bar filled with familiar faces as friends and associates gathered to welcome Billy Bats home after his prison sentence. Drinks circulated. Stories from the old days resurfaced. And Bats enjoyed the attention that came with being a made soldier in the Gambino crime family. Across the room stood Tommy DeSimone, a young associate tied to Paul Vario's Lucchese crew. DeSimone was ambitious and volatile, but he still held no formal rank inside the mafia hierarchy. In that world, the difference between an associate and a made soldier defined who held power in a room. At some point during the night, Batts turned toward DeSimone and repeated an old insult from the neighborhood, loudly asking whether he was still shining shoes. The remark drew laughter from some of the men nearby, but the moment carried a deeper meaning inside mafia culture. Accounts of the exchange later surfaced through Henry Hill's testimony and later historical records, where the incident was described as the moment that pushed the conflict toward violence. Public humiliation was difficult to ignore in that world. Yet DeSimone also understood the rule that stood between anger and retaliation. Batts was a made man, and harming a made soldier without permission from his family could trigger consequences far beyond a barroom argument. Breaking the mafia's oldest law, the insult did not fade after that night. In the days that followed, the humiliation stayed with Tommy DeSimone. Associates who had witnessed the exchange understood the tension immediately. In their world, pride and reputation carried real weight, but the rules were clear. Batts' position as a made soldier meant retaliation required permission from Gambino leadership. Without that approval, any act of violence would be considered a direct attack on the family itself. For Jimmy Burke and the other men around DeSimone, the situation created a dangerous dilemma. Burke was one of the most successful earners in Paul Vario's crew, deeply involved in cargo theft operations and other lucrative rackets. Maintaining stability between families was good for business. Yet DeSimone's anger kept growing. Eventually, a decision was made that ignored the consequences. Batts was invited back to the bar under the impression that the tension had passed. When he arrived, the situation changed quickly. DeSimone attacked him and Burke joined in. Batts was beaten severely inside the bar before being transported elsewhere. Accounts differ on the exact details of the killing, but investigators later concluded that Batts was murdered that night. The decision shattered one of the mafia's oldest rules. A made Gambino soldier had been killed by men who had no authority to do it. The act was not simply a murder. It was a violation of the structure that governed relationships between crime families. Once Batts disappeared, the consequences were only a matter of time. The quiet response from the Gambinos. When William "Billy" Batts Bentvena vanished from Brooklyn in June 1970, the disappearance did not go unnoticed inside the mafia. A made Gambino soldier had suddenly stopped appearing at bars, meetings, and neighborhood gatherings. That kind of absence always raised questions. Within organized crime, killings of made members followed strict procedures. If a family approved a murder, the decision usually came from leadership and was carefully communicated. Batts' disappearance carried none of those signals. Instead, rumors began to circulate quietly across Brooklyn and Queens. Associates who had been present at the bar knew something had happened. Word moved through the informal channels that connected crews across the city. Eventually, the information reached the Gambino leadership. For them, the issue was not simply Batts' death, it was the precedent. If associates from another crew could kill a made Gambino soldier without authorization, it threatened the authority of the entire family. Responses inside the mafia were rarely immediate or public. Retaliation often moved slowly through conversations between captains and bosses. The commission system that coordinated relationships between the major New York families existed precisely to prevent open war. But the rule remained clear. Killing a made man without permission required consequences. Over time, suspicion settled heavily on the men connected to Paul Vario's crew. Investigators later suggested that the killing of Batts became one of the reasons Tommy DeSimone himself would eventually disappear. Inside the mafia, justice did not always arrive quickly, but deaths like that were rarely forgotten. The bottom line: status as a death sentence. In the mafia, rank was supposed to guarantee safety. Becoming a made soldier meant protection from rivals, respect from associates, and a backing of an entire crime family. For William "Billy" Batts Bentvena, that status should have made him untouchable. Instead, it turned his death into a permanent problem. If Batts had been an associate, the killing might have faded into the background of Brooklyn's underworld. But he was a sworn member of the Gambino crime family. His disappearance carried weight, and the violation of that rule lingered long after the bar where it happened went quiet. Over the years, suspicion, retaliation, and internal mafia politics closed in on the men responsible. In that world, debts rarely disappear. They simply wait. Batts survived prison, but the protection that came with his rank ensured that the consequences of his death would follow everyone involved. If you value real, documented organized crime history, consider subscribing.